Okay, so hello guys. Um, we don't usually do lives on Tuesdays, but we felt like going live. There's been a lot of news this week, a lot of news. The transfer window seems to be speeding up. And before we really get into it, I'm here with George. How are you, George?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good, man. Yeah, as I've said, it's been very busy so far this week. Hello, Melina. Yeah, it's been busy. We're finished as a club. Yeah, so what would you like to start on? Because there's been actually a lot of news, especially today and yesterday.
Well, I think probably the best thing is Kevin Betsy and the youth stuff, and then we can probably work ourselves up to all the links because that's some huge news that Bob brought to you guys very early. So
Yeah,
if that's maybe we should start there.
yeah, we spoke about the new U23 appointment maybe a couple of weeks, maybe even a month back,
A month back, I think, mate.
talking about Kevin Betsy, all these guys, the big change in youth for Arsenal because we have focused on it since 2018 as a club. And Kevin Betsy has helped some of our youngsters, but now he's getting a proper role as the U23 coach, which is important, especially with the importance we've given to Perma as a club.
Yeah, and I mean, also when you look back at Kevin Betsy, right, guys, he was the U17 World Cup winning coach with that big group with Cal Hudson-Odoi, which everyone was stacked with, really, with Phil
Yeah,
Foden. Emil was in that group, but he didn't really feature too much. But Kevin Betsy is a phenomenal coach. He's been with the England U setups from U15, 16, and U18, I believe, as well as the U17s, of course. And now that is both Kevin Betsy, Dan Machichi, who, again, I would encourage everybody to go back to. I think it was our third pod. It was just the youth scouting pod, and just have a look back where we went a little bit more in depth. But guys, this is what our kind of, I would say, our path has been with Per Mertesacker, kind of recruit from the English setup, talented young coaches that are actually focused on attacking play. I would say both Dan Machichi and Kevin Betsy are both coaches focused on a little bit more attacking play in general. So you can see a very distinct difference. And I think Kevin Betsy, who has already been very well known to incorporate youth talents. Again, he did win that U17 kind of World Cup, but they played some great football as well.
yeah, they were cool.
Um, yeah, they were absolutely insane. And so when you start looking at like the U23s and what kind of talent we have, I mean, it gets exciting, right? Like when you look at Amari Hutchinson, Keto, and you look at others as well, it really is kind of encouraging to see us continue in that path. And so, yeah, thanks, Yo-Yo. I mean, yeah, we were very early with the reshuffle at the youth, but also highlighting Kevin Betsy, who wasn't confirmed. And again, this just follows a plan. And I hope people can see what we've been talking about and longtime viewers can understand that this youth philosophy from Per Mertesacker is not chance. I hope we can all stop. I mean, it's been a very purposeful plan, and the recruitment done in that area has been absolutely immense. So let's kind of see what kind of loans we're doing right now. I think I'm really excited about Daniel Ballard and what he's going to do at Blackpool. He had an excellent loan with Millwall. They wanted him back, but this is just a step up in the championship. And if you're looking back, who else who's now recently on our books had a very similar path up through the English ranks? Ben White. And so I'm not saying that he's going to be the same level as Ben White, but there seems to be an absolute desire to kind of recruit domestically and have a path domestically for these homegrown talents. And I love it, right? Blackpool are going to be serious contenders for promotion and in the playoffs. So
Yes.
I really think this is a great move for him. Let's see how he fares. Hopefully he steps up to the challenge. And, I do have Daniel Ballard as somebody that is probably our best pure defender in the youth ranks. As a pure defender, right? Like he does need to work on his on the ball and possession kind of differences. And I think for me, his ceiling is much more in the line of a squad depth option. I don't see him necessarily in that Rolls Royce kind of center back, but we don't need that. And he's absolutely potential wise able to be, I would argue, championship or maybe Premier League standard, I would say. That's definitely his level in terms of ceiling. So yeah, mate, like I'm absolutely ecstatic. And I think Kevin Betsy is going to be a huge recruitment. Again, he's worked with Dan Machichi below him. Like that was literally the promotion from England. And so when you're looking at how do we progress? So it's not even just if the coaching philosophies are the same, which ironically they are because we recruited from the England setup, right? You're talking about guys that have worked together in terms of a transition. So what I mean by that, Amani Richards, who we recently acquired, who's more along the lines of your U18 kind of crop or your U16 crop, right? Having Dan, who knows what Kevin is like, is absolutely critical for understanding when are they ready for that step up. When are they ready to take that next step? Because, guys, it's not linear. Bukayo Saka is a very unique situation, but when he was back in the U18s, everyone had highlighted him as somebody that was definitely a talent, but to see his rise so quick and so stark was, I think, exponential and not something the club had even kind of foresaw. And so knowing when you can challenge your youth at the appropriate level is critical to not having an ACPOM situation, critical to not having, a benicophobia in my mind and in my opinion. I think having people stagnate too early or not challenged early enough can lead to you not realizing your potential. So I go on this rant only kind of to say I think Dan Machichi, Kevin Betsy is just an awesome development plan, a very purposeful one, and follows in line once again with what Per Mertesacker has been looking to do. Let's recruit the best domestic minds in the England setup and in the game domestically for our domestic talents. And of course, Kevin Gillard is going to supplement that, right? Chris, with his loan management in terms of making sure that these U23s that we believe are potentially ready are able to go out on loans from people that have coached them. That's the key part. It isn't just, hey, we're going to be using our loan manager and Ben Napier. We now have that paired with Ken Gillard to really make that a very seamless introduction. I don't know. What about you, Chris, on last thoughts I get?
We talked about this a lot more in depth on that podcast, but if those who don't know, like Ken Gillard is now with this role where he coaches those that we're looking to loan out. So he'll be that like transition or help with Ben Napier to find a suitable club for our talents and then to really help them for the future. Because we have seen an improvement in our loans with like Willock, Ballard, Mavropanos, all these guys had successful loans. So you will see an improvement in all that in the next season. So with Arsenal, I'm seeing Archie here really doesn't like this, but he really doesn't like the Cronkies and Arteta for giving Xhaka potentially a new 4-year deal.
Should we answer maybe right before how does Keto fit in with his new contract? Because that's worth saying. Just to maybe round out, guys. I don't know about you, but since last year, that would make. I may miss a couple, but Gabriel Martinelli, Bukayo Saka, Emile Smith-Rowe, Kieran Tierney, Arthur Okonkwo, and Keto Taylor-Hart. That is 6 youth signings or under 23 signings. Balogun, there we go. There's another one. That is a clear change in infrastructure. I don't know why people aren't highlighting this, but we have let youths go in the past. Your Yunus Musa, your types that were very good talents that we wanted to keep in-house. But in terms of where does Keto fit in, I want to be very specific. I think Keto right now is in a Bukayo Saka 2018 mold. So he will be with the U23s, but he's going to have cameos in the first team. He's going to be like Arthur, where it's more about integration into the culture. I don't expect him to be starting or even to be future kind of competing with the wingers right now. I do have him just as a cameo setting in Carabao Cups, the odd FA Cup. And then if we do have a setting in terms of the league to maybe do it, it would make sense to look at Keto Taylor-Hart as coming in for a cameo. But this is the first year in the first team setup. And I have anybody who knows me knows that for me, Keto Taylor-Hart is the best youngster in potential in Hale End right now. He's the most complete and he is the most physically ready of the Hale End youngsters currently right now. Even ahead of Aziz, he is more physically developed. And that's another one who we have had recent news, is not going to be going out on loan. Is going to be Brooke is excellent as well. I think he's ready. I don't know if he's quite Keto ready. I'll be honest. I've seen him a little bit. He's physically great, but I think he's got a couple tactical issues to go through. He's probably got another 2 years, I would predict for myself, but it's awesome. I think Keto, Taylor Hart, Archie, to answer your question personally, he's in cameo season. He's got the Bukayo Emery-esque season ahead of him where he's going to have the odd cameo, and I would actually say next season is where he'll feature. He'll absolutely be ready in terms of the first team. He'll probably be inducted into the first team next season, but they're just going to let him grow with the U23s and have cameos. I'm sure, as it's been said, he's going to train regularly with the first team. So as opposed to putting that pressure on his shoulders right now in this instant, he's not quite in the first team, but he basically is. I don't know how to put this. He hasn't been officially promoted, but it's been well reported.
Training with them in the summer.
Exactly, and he'll be training with them. So yeah.
Yeah, Willow, what do you think of the youth changes we've done?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke on it. I've touched on it on Spaces really, and talked about how the transition has been, and George has rightly so touched on it, on how many people have actually signed long-term deals over the past year. And some people say, oh, but they should be doing that anyway. But I just want to look around. You kind of look at Chelsea this year. They've lost 4 of their best academy players. They've lost their, Academy Player of the Year, and Livramento's just gone to Southampton. It's much harder than you think to actually get these academy players, and especially how good our academy is. We have some of the best academy product in the world, and I don't say that lightly. So to get them all locked down and in on this project, it excites me. And it's a major difference. And I think people may brush over it now, but I think you'll reap the rewards of that in, say, 2 to 3 years' time, when you're seeing more of these youth products get involved in our team, and you see like a Keto breakthrough and see how good he actually is. But also maybe even see one of them actually be sold for some money, which will go towards a high transfer, which will be a high transfer fee that can go towards, one of our big targets of like summer 2024 or something.
If we're going to be a self-sustaining model, right, Willow, that's a crucial cog of making sure we achieve that. And I think you make an excellent point about making our best youth talent stay. Chelsea have been horrendous in that. And by the way, Livramento, let's not kind of poo-poo it. He was the actual academy player of the season, not just Chelsea, but the academy player in general. Yeah. He was an excellent prospect, and that's poor from them. It's absolutely poor from them. Having your tail-end talents, or rather your domestic talents, leave from your club loses a little bit of your identity. And by the way, Tammy, Callum Hudson-Odoi, only Mason Mount has been very fruitful in terms of first-team involvement. In terms of Man City, Phil Foden. In terms of Liverpool, Harvey Elliott, potentially Curtis Jones. Once again, you're looking at very few, 1 or 2 academy talents, whereas Arsenal have had a kind of a plethora right now, with just Okonkwo officially, Emile Smith-Rowe, Bukayo Saka officially in there. Then you've got to sprinkle it with your Gabriel Martinelli, who we bought young. It is absolutely the glue that makes dynasties kind of grow. And the last point that I would make is I think it's very clear that the homegrown rules are going to change very soon. I think that Richard Garlick, who was ahead of the Premier League, is absolutely going to highlight that for us. It makes no coincidence that we are after U24 domestic talents in our recruits. Ben White, James Maddison. There's a very clear, I think, distinction, and it's not just adaptation. I think that's a lazy correlation argument that people use in the Prem Proven stuff. We don't like that here. We look at profiles, and it's not just profiles, but I think there's going to be a homegrown kind of rule change very near into the future in terms of increasing the status and the number of talents that you have to have in your first team, but also kind of expanding the number, because I believe it's 8 now, if I'm wrong. Maybe the lads can kind of correct me if I am. I believe
I think you can have 17 foreign players in your team, which also, so it leaves 8 because it's 25-man squad.
Exactly. And so then I think that actually increases, particularly with Brexit. And I don't mean to be one of those, and I'm not educated kind of in the matters there, but I think the political implications do mean a little bit more of an impetus on domestic talent and making it difficult for foreign talents to come in. So the consequence of that is making sure that your squad is built with U24 pillars that are great in your spine that can then solve that issue of, hey, if you need to increase your quota, it's no problem for us. So yeah, I think it's worth this little segment. I don't know if you guys have any last minute thoughts on it, but I'm just ecstatic that A, our predictions got right. It's amazing when you get those. But B, that we actually have these confirmed, because I don't think there is a youth right now where I'm scared of in their youth contract, by the way. And I could not say that last season. I Could not.
No.
So it is a change.
Them all tied down, and they can all see a pathway into the first team. Because in the past, we've seen people continuously complain about Nabry, Benassa, Musa, all these players, and we won't have that with these youngsters. Onto more Arsenal news. The first team, two big things happened today. We officially made a bid for Maddison, and we look like we've given Xhaka a new 4-year contract. Which one do you want to talk about first?
Well, really quickly, I just want to maybe highlight the Partey injury because that's probably going to be a very small segment. If you can maybe put up the King Shazam, and I'm going to gloat a bit. I did tell everybody to freaking relax. I was not a fan of what was cropping up on Twitter about long-term kind of injuries. I did say grade 1 in many of my group chats to a lot of people in terms of a 7 to 10 day prognosis. It's probably a grade 1E version sprain, and it's very encouraging. Look, at the end of the day, I don't think there's anything long-term. We don't have to worry about that, by the way. In terms of the news that we've received, the fact he wasn't on a boot just confirmed it wasn't a high-severity injury. And so we got confirmation from Watts, I believe, too, right? Like, it wasn't just, some Chris Wheatley. I think Charles also said that there was only a 2-week timeline. So it fits with my grade 1, 7 to 10 day. So I don't believe that, we're looking at anything huge. It's going to be daily stress tests just for people that are wondering right now. And it's very big gray zone with these things, by the way. Like, he could be back tomorrow or he could take the full 7 to 10 days. But you just do daily stress tests and there's nothing long-term issues regarding it. But I would say Brentford personally might be a little bit too soon. But if he passes this daily stress test, there's no issue with him playing. It really is that simple. So 7 to 10 days is literally kind of the time frame. Add another 3 or 4 days for fitness. I would argue, just to get back in the rhythm of it. And you're looking at probably a 2-week timeline, roughly. So before Chelsea, but Brentford might be too early, might be okay.
I think we should be good for that anyway. I'm more than happy to have Xhaka Lokonga. Maybe I'm loving watching Lokonga at the moment. He is. So he excites me. The part, how he receives the ball, his confidence, and even like his actual passing display. That pass in that Chelsea game for Pepe was beautiful to watch. So good.
Yeah, I highlighted that on Twitter. I don't know if anybody saw that kind of the post. It was literally that pass, and I just said, look, when you have a midfield that has the awareness to kind of receive on the half turn, look up, and be incisive in one fluid motion, it's vital, right? Everyone keeps critiquing our output, but if you increase the backline technical security, it releases our attackers to be in more frequent and favorable 1v1 moments, and that's exactly what he did. He let Pepe go 1v1. Now, I don't think he did the best in terms of getting there. He had a little bit more anticipation, but you give Pepe 5 more chances like that instead of 1 or 2, that output efficiency goes up regardless. But so
even so, though, like we still did. If it was Premier League, we still did score from that chance. It did go in.
Absolutely.
We didn't have goal on technology, so it just shows you how crucial it is.
Yeah, all our pivot players in that game, apart from El Neni, obviously, put them balls in behind like maybe 5-6 times and gave us big chances, especially because Oba was poor in finishing that game and we weren't efficient. But it shows a new dynamic from our pivot that Xhaka first came on and banged straight to Aubameyang. And but it is positive seeing our midfield being more progressive and incisive, especially now that we're worrying about the season coming in 10 days. So
I think it shows a nice little snapshot is what to see from Arsenal in the future and what we're really striving to see from. Because a lot of people have branded us as boring football. There's nothing good about it. While you kind of see what we're trying to do now. And people are worried with that Chelsea game as well. But when you're using low block defenders in such a high line, obviously it's going to be a lot harder to actually play the game because they're going to get through a lot easier because they don't have the pace to keep up with the game. But yeah, I'm definitely excited to see what comes.
Quickly before we say Xhaka, what do you think of this? What's your answer to this question?
For me, yeah, 100%. He is ahead of Mo for me, but in terms of what they may offer, it's slightly differently. I've always said that I really want Sambi to be that conductor 8, very much Thomas Partey heir. So for me, when Thomas is out, Sambi is his replacement. Can they play together? Yes, they can, but it's really quite on low block teams only. I would not do that because Sambi does have some issues positionally. Even this game, I saw a couple issues about running back to goal and positionally where he was. It was a little bit difficult, but receiving on the half turn and then going into progression, he does it seamlessly. So yeah, Sambi absolutely should be ahead of Mo. And when we have Granite back, he's going to be the progression reins a little bit more. So I actually think it'll help Sambi in terms of his Premier League game. I think it's a decent environment. Brentford, who actually are quite progressive themselves. They won't sit back. They won't be a low block. So it'll actually be kind of a good test for him. I would be upset. I would critique Mikel if he does put in Mohamed Elneny. I do know that he enjoys preferring experience. And he does have a hesitancy to include youth early. But for me, this is a perfect environment, perfect time to include it. You've got Granite, who's been back for a week. He can help them throughout the game in experience. So I don't really have the excuse of he's not experienced enough. I think this is a great environment, great game for him to kind of thrive because Brentford will go for it and he'll be very useful on the high line, right? Brentford won't sit back. They themselves are a very modern kind of counter-pressy team. So I think that kind of ball that we've seen will be on the entire time, and we just know Mo doesn't do that. So yeah, for me, absolutely.
Yeah, I think George has covered everything there, really. Yeah, agreed. Definitely Sambi to start.
Same. So it's like now Xhaka. Wait, sorry. Xhaka got a new contract. What do you guys think?
So with Granite, right, so I think there's actually a little bit of uncertainty about the exact length, right, Willow? Like I've heard links from 2025, but then Art DeRoche just said it was a 1-year extension at 2024, and I really rate his reliability. So
Same, yeah.
Whether it's a 1 or a 2-year kind of extension for me, I'm going to be really quick with it. Everybody knows I want to move past that in midfield, but I always felt that this was a 1 year too soon to cut off that cord for me. I always envisioned that Granit Xhaka was going to be part of the squad. My issue has never been him part of the squad. It's been him starting. And so for me, this extension is not long enough to kind of secure you are the guy. It was absolutely an asset kind of protection. It still leaves 2 summer windows in his prime in a profile that ages quite well. Like these Regista deep line playmaker types, they age much better. They don't cut off at 30 or 31. So kind of that contract extension news for me is perfect in terms of viability, where it says, hey, in the next summer or even the following summer, we can still sell Granite for a pretty decent fee. Like it protects you from being at least 2 years out in both cases, kind of 3 in the next year. So for me, I was happy with the extension. I'll be honest. It's just I will be upset if it's not paired with a center mid purchase that is something a little bit different. Because for me, everybody knows I would prefer much more a Basuma type of sitter, or at the plan B, a Boubacar Kamara, who again is just a plan A and B in terms of valuations, but they're that same sitter type. And so that needs to happen for me. So I will praise the club for this aspect, saying we tied down an asset that, by the way, does strengthen us. I think Granit Xhaka leaving does weaken us, period. We all want something different, but fundamentally he's critical to the way we play currently, just not the way that we want to play. And so him staying is important for the squad. He's always available, right? And then when I look at pairing it with somebody like a Basuma, we don't have to fear for AFCON in terms of midfield squad depth. So us going to get a Basuma right now with Granite staying under the security of an extension is excellent for us. So yeah, I'm happy in the aspect that we've got somebody that makes us better, but I'd be upset if it was only Granite coming in, or not coming in, but being extended, and then no one else coming in that deep role.
Yeah, I'm exactly with you on that. But we need to see who's more athletic, and especially today, like seeing on the Chelsea game how high we brought up the line. There's going to be a lot of ground to cover, and Granite, I don't think's for that. I like, as you said, having Granite here because when we are playing a different type of system, it is good because he is a deep line passer. He can get them balls through. Like I think this season he was very good at that, on getting them little passes into the pockets of space. But he's definitely improved this last season was his best season in an Arsenal shirt. So keeping him for me is good, but yeah, I think we do need that different profile to be able to take us to that next level. And it's hard though with the contract extension, as said, that some people said 2025, some people said 2024. Maybe it's a 3-year deal with maybe an able to add on one more. That might be the confusion between the journalists at the moment, and I'd be down for that, protecting that asset and his value. So I think, yeah, move on from Xhaka maybe next summer. I was never taking that 12 million plus 3 from Roma. I thought that was actually taking the mick. Like, what is that? And that was euros as well. So that's probably like 12.5 to 13 million pounds. Like, if you do that, it just completely, I think, destroys your reputation. What you're trying to do. We've got new people in now in the club who are in charge of transfers. If they go and roll over on one of their like biggest assets last year, Xhaka was one of the most minutes played last season, had a very good Euros. If you go and sell him for 13 million, I think that makes it very hard for you to be able to sell players in the future.
And again, it reduces your authority in the market, doesn't it? Like, it's absolutely ridiculous if we're going to sit here and demand to be back at the top, because I guarantee you Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City, United, nobody is selling their prime first-stage asset right now, regardless of what you think of quality, okay? That is a very wrong message to send in terms of us trying to reestablish our authority both in the market but on the pitch. So it was ridiculous. Another thing that, I have talked about, because I've told people we are going to be a pivot team. And I think this is very clear in terms of how we've recruited with James Maddison. But even in terms of what we saw in this past preseason game with Chelsea, in terms of that high press, and the right back was very much overlapping. Shock horror. We did say this would happen, but the big kind of tactical tweak is it actually kind of removes Granit's position as redundant. When you do look at it, when you do employ kind of a pivot and you do have overlapping fullbacks, especially with a high counter press, what you're going to see if kind of Thomas Partey is going to be a little bit higher up, that next kind of lone pivot is not going to, he's kind of going to be in the same spaces as a Gabriel or your left center back, right? The idea that we need somebody covering in that left corridor when Tierney bombs on is not going to be the case, because we have two fullbacks overlapping. So what that pushes you to do is to recruit a second player with horizontal agility and to go very much in the Invincibles mold. I'm smiling because this is what I wanted. This is what I saw, and I saw it at Chelsea. It was very, very clear. So you're going to have that 2-2-6 kind of Invincibles mold where you're going to have your pivot meeting out wide, and it's going to be much easier to transition into a 4-4-2 defensive block, right? So for me, it actually, this counter press and this halfway line defending very clearly move Xhaka out in terms of role and what he actually does, because we aren't going to be playing the same. We very clearly had a right back overlapping. And so while it isn't the greatest with Callum, it very, very clearly showed, to me at least, that is Mikel's long-term plan, not really the three-man midfield that we were predicting from what people said. And, I'm going to gloat a bit. We all said that this was the case. And I met a lot of, contrarian kind of views to it. But remember, these kind of purchases, Basuma, Glenn Kamara, I do those purposely because they actually could play lone pivots if they really wanted to. So I don't dismiss the three-man midfield as a future. I don't like it. I really don't want it to be the case. I don't think Mikel does either, but it's very important to me to start to recruit profiles that can do both, right? Like, it doesn't make sense to me to limit yourself to one formation, because that's also not just good for Mikel, but that's good for us long-term, right? Like, I'm very cognizant of making sure a team isn't reliant on one man. And while I think kind of Mikel received the authority in the club, I'm very cognizant of not recruiting only to his type. And so for me, those types are very versatile. They can do whatever they really want. So yeah, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, for the whole preseason, we have seen a less Xhaka dependent system being put in place. With the left centre mid has definitely been a bit more central than last year, and so even with Onana, sometimes they've been fluctuating, switching between left and right, and continuously switching. So the system change is definitely evident with the right back and left centre mid. So, apart from Xhaka, obviously our biggest news probably today is the Maddison bid. A lot of the bigger journalists have said that we did. I'm not sure on the price, but they said we did a bid with a player swap plus money for Maddison. What player do you think this is, and what do you think of the bid?
I think it's very clearly Ainsley Maitland-Niles. We kind of had confirmation from, there's that one guy, Darren, on Arsenal, who's very reliable. He did it. But also Ainsley had interest from them in kind of January, and they are after a right mid in terms of a 4-4-2. And so Ainsley, he would fit there, but I don't think Ainsley really wants to play on the right side. In fact, we would have kept him if he would have compromised on that. So for us, I'm sure he's demanded center mid, and that's kind of why it's got rejected, where I think Leicester would have been interested. Absolutely. I mean, they were in January, right? And I think it was actually a really great first bid. It was a very aggressive first bid, by the way, because I guarantee it was for 40 or 45 million pounds plus a player. And so I actually think that the issue is very similar to Ben White, where on valuation, we're spot on. That's not the issue in terms of valuation. It's about how do we get there. So if we're not going to include a player in this deal, it's going to probably be straight cash. I've always thought so. And what we're just going to have to do is kind of change up the structure of payments, very much like Ben White, right? Like I think the Athletic kind of showed everybody that our valuation wasn't wrong, but I think we made 6 bids in terms of the structure when I was reading. So the structure was, or the final fee was never the issue. It was the structure on that. And I think it's very similar to James Maddison. So we're just going to have to play with like negotiations about how much money we are willing to spend up front. And again, I think this is why some of the sales are actually beneficial. So I think Ainsley, while it's probably him as that player, he's probably going to go to someone like Burnley. And what that helps us do is provide money for more upfront payments, right? I don't think it's a financial issue. I think people confuse this on Twitter. It's not that we can't afford it. It's about, look, the valuation is 65 million pounds to maybe 70. Okay, that's the valuation.
And that goes down with more you pay up front.
Exactly. And so what are we going to pay 40 million up front, 45, 50? What is that number, that magic number that we're going to do? And then the rest is going to be in kind of installments, very much how Ben White wasn't 50 up front. It was 30 plus 20, right? And 20 is spread over the length of his contract. And so that is going to be the negotiation tactic, but it gives us more flexibility with sales to have more money readily available. So that's why I really do think that Ainsley gets pushed to Burnley kind of in the next week or two. And I actually do think Joe, regretfully, because everyone on Twitter knows I love Joe Willock, is actually going to be going to Newcastle, especially with that link, which we'll talk a little bit later because I know this is on Maddison. But there was a link with Newcastle willing to pay the 22 million quoted price. So we'll maybe jump on that a little bit later. But in terms of me for the Maddison, this bid has been long in the making. It's just public now, but it's the first step, right, guys? Like once that gets public, I think there's an air of an inevitability for me. And you know what? Arsenal always get their top target. So for me, I've never been afraid of James Maddison. Actually, I've been afraid for what comes after him. Like I've always said, when people ask me, are you sure about James Maddison coming? Yeah, 100%. James Maddison coming is not a debate for me. He's basically going to come 100%. The thing that I'm worried about, what happens in addition to that, because we do need more. And I don't know who comes with more. I think with us, it's very clear we have 40 million pounds plus a James Maddison money. And the reason I say this logic is because we were bidding for Locatelli, even though I know that we thought Xhaka was leaving. That was the pot of money that we were bidding, right? And Aaron Ramsdale is quoted at 35 million pounds. I know we're not getting these players, but I just show it to you that that is the pot of money that we have in addition to James Maddison money. So what are you going to do with 40 million pounds? That's the question for me. Well, you need a goalkeeper. And for me, I would prefer a center mid because I don't see us recruiting a right back until Hector goes. And that clearly has slowed. And so for me, if Hector doesn't go, we don't get a right back. And while for me at center mid, we can recruit one. We're already short in center mid, so that's not an issue for me. And attacking mid and goalkeeper are the only positions right now that we don't have bloated kind of positions in. We need a backup goalkeeper. We need an attacking midfielder, so we don't need to sell to buy in that aspect. So yeah, I'm ecstatic about James Maddison. I think everybody on the channel knows, we kind of had some, discussions about what I feel about James Maddison. A thread is coming tomorrow from myself if you really do want to have a more in-depth view. But we've made videos on James Maddison, right, Chris? I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but James Maddison needs us just as much as we need him. And this is going to be a huge signing where he's going to be the man. He is our franchise player. That I think that's going to be clear. He's going to be the man that's going to lead. He's going to be the project. He's going to be that, as people have said, the arrival of the Amazon documentary. Like, he is going to be that guy. And so we're giving him the keys. And I, for one, am ecstatic about it. I've done a lot of deep dive into the player, not only scouting, but, in terms of his interviews. He is elite mentality, absolutely elite mentality. And I have no doubts that he gets 20 goals or assists in the season. I'm not worried about his hip injury whatsoever medically. It's completely fine, particularly if we do our due diligence. And no, mate, Chris, like, I'm ecstatic. Everybody knows, whoever knows me, James Maddison was my one number 10 exception. I always wanted a left-sided creator, but I always told everybody, if James Maddison, ever was available, that is my guy that I 100% would do, and I would break my values for. And yeah, so I'm just absolutely ecstatic. I could see him as the perfect Arteta player. And in this high line, in this counter-pressing team, James Maddison is going to be a phenom. He's going to love it. It's exactly what, he loves. It's going to combine the best of what he did with Brendan with what he did at Norwich, by the way. And so for me, you're going to get a James Maddison motivated to get back in the England squad that's ready to take the mantle. And I'm just really ecstatic about it. I don't know about what you guys think.
Yeah, I think Madders is an exciting bid because we've finally gone past the first three, because it seemed that we were stuck on in the media anyways, we were stuck on that first Lokonga, Tavares, White, Saga type, like announcing all them deals. And as soon as White is announced the week after, you see that we finally made our Maddison bid. So it's like, it's not out in the open that we're actually interested in Maddison, and there's not rumours, because a lot of fans were trying to dismiss it as rumours. And I think we can afford it, just like the White thing. But I think it's a thing where with these clubs, the more you pay up front, the less the overall deal will be. So if we're willing to pay 50, 40 million up front, I think the deal will go lower. But the less and that's why I think we're trying to force players like Bellerin. Maybe that's why we're looking at guys like Lautaro Martinez or something, just to get the numbers out so that you have more to pay up front. What do you think, Norman Willer?
Yeah, James Maddison, I'd be over the moon with. I don't know. I've been silently quite confident over getting James Maddison. I just think it is the perfect fit, as you kind of said. Helps him get back into the English team. He'd be our franchise name. You've got that number 8 shirt ready for him to be wearing. He's going to get you goals. He's going to get you assists, set pieces as well. It's been a major downfall for us in set pieces, actually converting them, and he will have that final ball to put into the box. Also, scoring from outside the box. We've been lackluster in that recently, so he'll bring that. Free kicks as well. He's also very good set piece taker on scoring free kicks. So James Maddison would just be, it would be so good. And as we touched on earlier, the kind of English quota, it also fulfills that as well. So you've got an English player there that goes towards the 8 that we need, and even so more if the rules change and you need even more. And I think as well, you get James Maddison in. Hopefully, as we talked about, you get a DM and a goalkeeper in as well. I think we could definitely get a DM in, as we talked about earlier, the Locatelli not going through the 45 million. That shouldn't hopefully affect anything. And I think you can go for a cheaper option. We touched on Kamara. He should be available for 15 million. He's only got a year left in his deal. And I think even Basuma, I think overall it'd be 35 million, but I don't see it being more than 20 to 25 million up front. I don't know if you guys disagree, but I think that'd be the kind of thing Brighton would be looking for. And then goalkeeper, I think just looking at the Chelsea game, I think it's so crucial that we need a goalkeeper. The passing out from the back has been so, Leno just cannot do it. And we've seen it for so long now. We need a ball-playing goalkeeper.
Yeah, I mean, and you know what? Again, I'm not surprised Onana is apparently stalled to Leon. I told everybody about this. Onana will not agree with a club until he's able to train. Any move that will happen, if it does happen this window, happens at the end of the window. You're not going to be paying wages for somebody that cannot train until September. I'm still very kind of confident on that actually kind of pushing through. And if not, you're kind of looking at a Sam Johnson and an Aaron Ramsdale. But for those kind of additions, I fear, because they don't fix what you're saying, Willow, like in terms of the profile that you're looking at those players, they don't fix that. And for me, I don't recruit players unless they fix a hole, period. So I'm still confident, though, kind of on Onana, so I'm not really going to go away from that personally. It's going to be a cheap deal as well. So again, I look at that 40 million, like you said, Willow, with Locatelli. The logic I take from all these stuff is that you have 40 million pounds to play with in addition to James Maddison money, excluding sales. So what do you buy? That's the question, right?
Even the Brandio as well for the 35 million we done.
Exactly. So like that's the range, right? I think anyone with logic can agree like 35 to 40 million is the range that we've got in addition to a James Maddison money. So what can you get with 35, 40 million? Of course, excluding sales. Let's say we start doing a bunch of sales and it increases, but I think that's the pot. And so for me, you get something, like I said, Basuma, if you can get it for 35 to 40 million, and then Onana is nothing more than, 5 to maybe 8 million pounds. So I've always felt that's the end goal for myself. But like you said, if not, Boubacar Kamara is an absolute stellar talent that I've been on about for absolutely months. And I know that Nam is a big fan. So I don't know, that's kind of like a really good transition in terms of maybe Nam, what you think about the Maddison deal, but maybe even a DM / Kamara.
Yeah, to be honest, George and myself, we floated like different theories, didn't we, at the start of the window? It's really difficult. I've always said, look, it's very difficult to predict a window, right? You might have key star players that you go into, and I think you've seen this with Arsenal. They've gone in with certain players in mind and they bid for them. Where they fit into the overall picture, it's very difficult to read. I remember lots of meltdowns. We've been on Spaces together, where people thought maybe Buendia was our #1 target, and this is before the Maddison information came out. And when the Maddison information came out, we didn't bid and we stopped. We knew it wasn't because of cash, although at that time, I think before, the fan base were all worried that we wouldn't invest. And I think a lot of us here on this 4 panelists, we were talking with various people and fan base, people on Twitter about how, it would be madness for the ownership not to have money and to really push it out and back the manager, right? Because as I said, it would be suicidal, I think, from the ownership point of view. We definitely have money. I think the complexity of the transfer market is what's caused issues within our fan base. I think people have got worried because things have slowed down. And I remember telling people before the transfer window started that there's 3 phases to this window. The first initial phase we made, we secured 3 deals, let's say, in the first phase. The white deal was only completed because of the Euros. The middle phase was always going to be a bit weird because, the Euros finish and you can't predict how the tournament affects, because I think people don't know if they should pull the trigger now or they should be a little bit more safe and wait and see how things develop, because, we're not the only club with multiple targets, right? Going back to Maddison, I think Maddison is a clear cut for me. I mean, it's if you just take away the player and said what were the weaknesses for Arsenal as a team last year, and you just looked at what our weaknesses were, our weaknesses was very simple in terms of what we didn't get enough goals, we didn't get enough assists, and Maddison provides you with a consistent basis in terms of goals and assists. Okay, he's done that year in, year out. Now, not only is he good at doing that, he also covers that angle that we've talked about before, which is about set pieces. We were poor on set pieces last year, especially offensively. And what excites me is if we get, our striking options right, and we all work out how we're going to attack these set pieces and how we, all the other bits that we weren't very good at. Let's be frank. It wasn't just about delivery last year. It was about planning and how we delivered the ball into the box. I think we took a lot of short corners, which I can understand why Arteta would do that, because Man City excel at that, and they score a lot more set pieces through what I would call almost drawing out the line and playing around with the opposition's defensive line, and block. So we need a lot more work on that, and I'm so glad that we've got the Man City guy in, because I think he did some really good work. So those of you fans who aren't familiar with, I can't pronounce his name. George, you probably know how to pronounce it. Yeah, that's it. So if you guys don't know who this guy is, go and do some homework on him, because you'll find that his coaching career goes all the way back to Canada, if I'm right. George is a Canadian French guy, and he started his career there. So for me, I'm really excited about that, because we needed a weapon, a primary weapon that could help. Even with young players like Saka. Saka, you can tell, hasn't learned how to take set pieces. So when you're a young player and you want to become better at set pieces, who do you look up to? You have to have a technical leader in set pieces, and I think Maddison will be an amazing technical leader. I think even Emil Smith-Rowe has potential with his delivery to also become a better set piece taker. So for me, that's what's exciting about Maddison. He comes in, he covers two massive aspects of our gameplay that will add another dimension. I think I actually was a big fan of Odegaard, but I feel like that balance can be addressed slightly differently, and I'll talk a bit about that later. The reason why I like Basuma, George is a massive Basuma fan. I know that for a fact. CK is a massive Basuma fan. Willow's a massive Basuma fan. Now, listen, by the way, I'm a Basuma fan too. But the reality is very, very difficult, and it's very rare for a club to make two transfer deals with the same club. It's very, very rare. It's very difficult, and sometimes it's very difficult to explain why that's the case. But I think it's a lot of like toing and froing, and so I don't know if that's going to happen. But I've always said, just like George, when we were talking about it, and Kamara first got linked, that actually that kid with his ability to not only play defensive midfield, he also, and if you think about it, I think our problem is this. My only other worry when I saw the Chelsea game was what happens if White is injured, or Gabriel is injured, and we have to bring in Marion Holding, or we have to play Marion Holding, God forbid, together. We would definitely have to drop that defensive line much further back, because you could see how both players are uncomfortable having that high defensive line. And by having that high defensive line, we were actually posing Chelsea problems, because we could compress the play. The problem we have is with players who don't know when, you can see Holding made two fundamental mistakes. I'm sorry to go into a game of this, but I want to show you guys how someone like Kamara can be useful, because I think he could also then fit in if, let's say, Ben White's injured, to sort of slot into that right centre-back role. He's about just slightly shorter than Ben.
6'1", I think. And
yeah,
I think so. Ben is 6'2".
They both have the same, what I call technical aspects. In the fact, I think Ben's much more of a Rolls-Royce player. I think Kamara is much more of an aggressive player. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So, but I can imagine even someone like Kamara be able to still play in the back line as an emergency centre-back.
He's played there, quite a lot.
Yeah, no, he has.
A lot of games.
Yeah, I think the problem, initially why clubs didn't move for him was because they were saying as a centre-back, and why, first of all, he's technically brilliant. But secondly, I think people thought that in the Premiership, and this is why other clubs haven't gone in for him before, is that a shorter centre-back like him might not work. And I think people's viewpoints are changing, right? Because I think this is the problem with our football in this country. We're slightly behind the trend of certain things. You have to have managers like Bielsa and Pep and Arsene to come along and change people's perceptions about how football can be played and what limitations players have and how you can overcome those limitations and what are more important aspects. Now, if you look in Europe, just being tall isn't just good enough now. You have to be able to play the ball out of defense. So that is a huge skill. Now, if you're a tall guy and you can win it, I'll give you an example. Kabak's a monster in the air, right? But if you can't play that ball out of defense like Virgil or, even like David Luiz, then your monstrosity in the air doesn't help you in the build-up. And if that doesn't help you in the build-up, that can affect the whole team, right? So for me, someone like Kamara would be a really smart move, because, again, he can and then people say, look, Norm, that's another defensive signing. What about the attackers? But I think the Chelsea game showed us that, look, ESR and Maddis are essential. You need two creative outlets. We didn't have that against Chelsea. We looked slightly a bit disjointed when we got the ball further up. I think when we played last year, even with Odegaard and ESR, we had much more technical security in zone 14. We could hold that ball in that area and have variation in our play, right? And that sounds very technical, but the truth is, if you're going to play against top-class opposition and you want the defence to be worried, you need to be able to hold it in areas where they need to think about what they need to do defensively, right?
Well, no, that's how you sustain. Sorry, just really quick. That's how you sustain attacking patterns. And we've talked about this on the channel quite a lot. There's two phases to that. It's controlling transitions, which is that high line kind of counter press. Okay, you want to control your ability on the counterattack, and then finally, it's technical security in the front line. And when you add somebody that's able to take hold of the ball, even in contact in that zone 14, that top of the box. That's how you sustain repeated pressure, right? It's not just good in terms of one. And of course, we talked about that where we're looking at backline technical security. What it allows us to do is it allows us to give the ball to our forwards in more frequent but favorable positions, right? And so your shots of your OBA are not just taking 1 or 2 shots per game, they're taking 4 or 5. And by the way, that's how these elite forwards get those numbers and output that they get. The efficiency of our forward line is actually fine. If you actually look at the conversion rates, they're fine. The problem is we're taking such few shots. And so when you expand that, you expand output. It's really quite simple.
But I mean, I agree with Willow and yourself though as well. Moving away from Maddison, I mean, Maddison, I think, as I said, is straightforward. I think, and most of our fan base can see what's going with him. But the goalkeeper is definitely, if I was going priority of signings, for me personally, it would be attacking midfielder. Then it would be the goalkeeper, because we don't have a number 2. So if we don't have a number 2, we're in trouble, right? We can't go into season and try to sort of secure a deal at the end. So we have to do something for number 2, even if it is Onana, George, because in January, do you know what I'm saying to you? Because I don't know, the goalkeeping situation is really complex. I'm hoping that the club have given themselves time now to formulate a plan, right? Accepting that Leno's not going to be shifted, because I can't see anyone, unless they know something that we don't know and there's a secret there somewhere. Because I think, the other things that I see also, I mean, for us, the key, I mean, you can see Leno, I mean, there was, I can't remember who's the, CK, you know this, who's the London Evening Standard guy, the reporter, we can even Kayanak, or how do you pronounce it? Kake, that's it. And I can't even pronounce it. I'm the worst pronouncer ever, right?
Yeah.
He tweeted something really interesting. He said that on the touchline, he could hear Arteta instructing Leno to keep the ball on the floor. And to be honest, I was saying the other day, listen, I think when you see the Premiership occur, you will see that Leno will not be allowed to take those kind of medium launch kicks. Because I think it's stupid. Ben White will have to do what David Luiz used to do, which is demand the ball from Leno, and he takes responsibility for using that ball constructively, because that's his role, right? That's what we brought him in for. But I was glad in a way, because one of the things that people need to understand about preseason friendlies, no manager wants to reveal their full deck of cards about what they're going to be developing for next year to the opposition managers, particularly to someone like Tuchel, right? I worry about some of our fans, because why would you do that? The reason why you don't do that is because you want to keep some of this developmental tactics and coaching and play away from the opposition. You don't want anyone recording what you're going to be doing, the switches of play, the patterns of play. So what you do is you put on a show about how you played last year. We didn't play any differently in that game. I didn't think, honestly, when I was looking closely, than how we played last year, right, against Chelsea. Do you know what I'm saying to you? And the only thing I saw Chelsea do was that they played 2 wide outlets, and they timed their runs from midfield. They were clever but we let them make those runs from midfield, because why? We pressed stupidly and we didn't leave enough cover, right?
Well, I think the one thing that we did is we took initiative in the game. I think the patterns of play were the same. So we did throw up our defensive line, but you're right. Like how we overloaded, how we build up was the exact same. It's just we were 15 yards up the pitch with kind of low block defenders that are uncomfortable in those spots. So of course we looked defensively compromised, but really it's not. It was very, very, very similar. But yeah.
I think what you'll see is a lot more massive differences when you've just got like those 2 centre backs in, and how they switch play and how they suck in the Chelsea press, right?
And even White, I'm sorry, like really quickly, like White, I've made this point in the past. I think David Luiz is an excellent ball-playing center back, but he wasn't a ball-progressing center back necessarily. And I don't want to be too technical, where I think he could step into midfield, but he definitely lost a yard of pace. And there were so many times last year where he sat back himself because he was afraid. And like, I don't blame him. He just wasn't athletically there. We got him in a little bit later in his career, but Ben is a ball-carrying center back as well. And that's huge in terms of opening up, not just that long switch that we talk about, which, by the way, he did for Bielsa on every single day of the week in terms of releasing there on rushing fullbacks. But what Ben can do is he can step into midfield, and he's been used to kind of covering that stopper area of space for Brighton. Because you look at Lamptey, he was an on-rushing right wing back. And so Ben is used to being outnumbered in that space. And so for me, it's amazing. So it's not only the ball passing, but he can demand it off Leno and step into midfield. We haven't had that. El Neni lost it. Bellerin's lost it. How many times did Ceballos lose it? And that's because they aren't progressive enough in terms of carrying the ball. They're not confident in that. They can switch on the half turn.
It's not only that, though. I think, in midfielders, because sometimes their movement carries them away. Defenders, it's easier to stand in set positions, because you know
They
when a static ball is played, you can stand in a set position, which literally puts as I said, I've said this before, where it puts the striker into a compromised position. They don't know whether to press you, because if they press you, they might lose position or they might break their cover shadow. Especially if they know a guy can dribble and pass. And I think the other thing that we need to understand, David Luiz is an excellent ball playing centre back, but there were times last year when he would play crazy passes. You know, where I'd look at him and think, David, you're an experienced international. Why did you play that ball? Because that ball wasn't on. He'll almost try to force the play. You know, I think you'll see White is a much more calculated player. He calculates the percentage. If you, there was a great interview I saw. I can't find it. I'm going to post it on Twitter if I can later on, where he talks about how he decides where to play the ball. Right?
It was that Leeds, right?
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I know which one it was. That
Yeah,
Leeds
the one where he's a Leeds player, and he talks about how he was coached by Bielsa to calculate which pass he should prioritize. Right, and then he goes through a list of prices. I think fans who haven't seen him talk about that will realize how intelligent the kid is. Anyhow, look, I don't want to spend ages on Ben White because we were talking about other things. I think you'll see Lokonga is an interesting prospect. I honestly think he could develop into an excellent six player. He's got still things that he needs to learn, but he's got interesting attributes, right? Really interesting attributes that have me intrigued. And what were we talking about? So we said goalkeeper. And as I said, look, for me, the hardest deal, I think, to get, apart from the goalkeeping one, which is because I think the goalkeeping one is more to do with complexity of all the different elements, right? But I think the hardest one is going to be the right back situation, because that's where the clock's going to be ticking, right? So we've got a couple of deals that we need to get sorted before we can get that right back. I'm just hoping, and I think it's always been a secret, I think, George. I think the right back target, that if we have one, is something that we would have kept open, that we would have known that there was other deals. You know, people were complaining the other day that Livramento went to Southampton, but we weren't ever going to rely on an 18-year-old to sort of surpass Callum Chambers. That's madness, right? He's not going to come and become our first choice. He's barely even played a minute in the Premiership, right? So he wasn't going to be the case. If people want to write back that actually we invest money in, like, you know, quite a considerable amount of money, then he has to come in and be able to sort of challenge Callum Chambers and take his place, right? And be competitive.
Yeah. And I don't think that's, unfortunately, I'm sorry, I just don't think that's going to happen as long as Hector's here. I think it's very clear that Ainsley could go, but I've always said we need 2 out and 1 in before that even becomes a possibility. So in terms of us not getting all of our gaps done, I've actually thought right back is very likely the one that we don't address, kind of in the window. Everyone knows my pick, Rydal Baku, in terms of who I want to come in to fix that role. But I think the one thing, Noam, that I do think we actually know about the right back is based on Chelsea, there was a very clear emphasis on the fullbacks overlapping both sides. I think that absolutely is the transition. Yeah, and in addition to the Watford right, and but also the links that we had prior, Hakimi, Lamptey, they all spoke to an overlapping fullback. So I really do think whoever we pick, it is going to be an overlapping fullback, and it makes sense in terms of the pivot, in terms of what we've seen, halfway line defending. I think that's the profile. I don't know if we do it. I'll be honest with you. I'm really kind of pessimistic on it.
George, I think the only thing I can think of rationally is, I know initially people mentioned like the British market, etc., but I think this is gut feeling, and I'm not usually one to talk about gut feelings because that's not usually the most concrete way of discussing. But I honestly think it might be something from the South American market. I tweeted something earlier. I honestly think we might be looking at that market where we might have a talent around the 21, 22, 23 bracket who we think needs to settle in a bit more, still give Callum Chambers some game time this year, but we think is making rapid enough progress once he's settled in to be able to sort of take his place and add a huge amount of quality. I think if you're going to do that, if you're not going to go for something like top end, like the very top end, because it's not there, then it's the right time to buy a developmental player, because we don't know if Callum, how the team is evolving, would be the right choice even for a second.
I don't think
right back in the long term for future. Do you know what I'm saying to you? So I don't want to.
Sure.
I love what he's doing now, but I'm not sure as the team evolves if, you know, and we've seen that with players, right? When the team evolves, that sometimes players get left behind.
I agree. And I think, you know what, Nom, like really quickly for myself, I thought right back was the only position I would compromise, if I'm really being honest with you. Like if you told me, George, look, you're going to get an attacking midfielder, we're going to get a goalkeeper, I think we all agree that's the minimum we do in this window. But your third purchase, that like wild card purchase, you get a center mid or a right back. Which one do you want to do? Well, for me, the right back market is so dry that it's going to be a chance regardless. And I have more of a sure thing in the center mid. So I would much rather buy a sure thing right now and kind of band-aid the right back to what we may want to do later.
George, I'm going to drop a name, but this isn't based on any info, right?
Yeah,
So,
of course.
so this is just purely based on something I saw, and you know what? I don't care if people criticize me for it, but I don't. It's a suggestion. One of the players I looked at before the window started was Gabriel Menino, and he's an interesting player for me because he has the potential to be actually very good at overlapping. He's a midfield player. He started off as a midfield player. Now he reminds me a bit of Lauren, right? And he also has the ability to play in midfield. So for me, I can't see how, this is my opinion, by the way, a player like him, who's done really well for Palmeiras, he's one of the youngest players to win the Copa Libertadores, to get into their squad, who's just made it, I think, in the Olympics at the moment, the Olympics team. I think a player like him would be perfect. Look, I know people are saying Bruno Guimaraes. I 100% understand why people are interested in him. But for me, there's a good compromise, and it doesn't stop us from then getting someone like a Riddle Baku later on. Does that make sense? Because I think he can compete in two positions. But look, as I said, I think we have to be a little bit more creative than just looking at the British market when it comes to that position. We might have to think to ourselves, where can we bring in a player that can help us in the meet, and then maybe wait even a year, maybe a bit longer for the correct profile of fullback. I don't think Riddle Baku will happen purely because I've never seen a club buy a player for a year, very rarely, and then decide they can sell it in the next market. Do you know what I'm saying to you? So
yeah, absolutely.
Especially when they have such a good performance in the what do you call it, under-21 European Championships.
And again, for me, like the big thing is we just need width, right? And that's why I can deal with a Callum up there. Like he's got a good width cross on him. Like I don't look, if he does get done in the back, I don't mind because now we have Ben White and he's used to that. He's used to being outnumbered and being a stopper in that area. So for me, I feel we can band-aid the position. Whereas I feel as though in order to get something different in center mid, that actually changes how we play a lot more. And if the right back is going to be a chance, like you said, and I agree with you, I don't have anybody else other than Riddle Baku, and anybody else would be a chance signing that we look to grow with. For me, I almost think that we need sure things this season. That's the one thing I'll say. So instead of, if we do recruit somebody, which I'm totally fine with it being a kind of a no-name, it would be a chance for me. And so I kind of struggle with that. So I'm like, you know what, let's just band-aid with Callum. If I do not get all my positions, I would say right back is the one I'm comfortable with. I don't want to compromise in the midfield. Call me old-fashioned, but you win games there. And so for me, I would much rather, secure that middle of the pitch with, say, your Kamara type, if that's like the third wild card purchase. But yeah, maybe I don't know, Willow, Chris, what do you guys think on this right back chat? Any kind of inkling on it?
I honestly think on the right back, I think Cedric and I've always said that Cedric and Chambers will be decent enough for at least one more year if we're going to compromise on all the positions, because we have already sorted out backup left back, backup centre mid. So it's now the four main positions, and I think Arteta himself will probably choose to compromise on the right back because he does seem happy with Cedric's attacking output, and he really dislikes what Leno does to our build-up and how Leno continuously kicks long, and he said that in interviews. So I think goalkeeper is something that we really want to change, and we've already bid for a couple centre mids. So it's active that we're looking for a centre mid. So I think right back is probably the compromise we'll take. And if we do say somehow we do get Maddison a centre mid and a goalkeeper and only miss our right back, I'll be actually happy with the window, because considering there's only one right back in my mind right now that I would really go for, and right back is probably the driest market out of all four positions if I really look at it. So I'd be happy if we do everything else apart from the right back.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, CK. Look, if we got James Maddison, say Basuma, Kamara, and the ball-playing goalkeeper and Onana, I am over the moon. Look, Rome is not built overnight, and I'm not going to be this guy to be like, oh, we didn't get every single thing. You're telling me we get an attacking midfielder, DM, goalkeeper, centre back, a backup left back, and a backup centre mid. you're joking if you're not taking that. You got to be kidding yourself, because that is outstanding. That is an outstanding window. The one that I do agree with what George went and said earlier about how overlapping our fullback was in the preseason. I think that does also show, Callum Chambers, I thought maybe he could do it this season, but seeing that now and how attacking he's going to be, I don't think he's got the pace to be able to do them recovery runs. So I don't know. For me, I would still, I don't know if I'd maybe try and loan a right back who's maybe got a bit of pace on him, or maybe just try and look for, as Noel said, maybe like a cheap deal in South America, just a little project player to maybe be our backup next season and then get our number one right back. But look, if we get everything else, I'm really not bothered.
Guys, I am bothered because I'm pretty sure we made a bet with Wave that he was going to write an apology letter, but we'll talk about that in another episode. Yeah.
So let's not talk about Arsenal. We've been talking about Arsenal for an hour. So the biggest news today is probably the €100 million plus Alonso bid from Chelsea to Lukaku. So obviously Chelsea have been looking at a striker this whole window. They've looked at Haaland, and it seems because the Sancho deal, the Haaland deal may be a no-go. So, like, what do you think of Chelsea potentially buying Lukaku?
Well, I think it's way more feasible than any other kind of striker purchase that they were looking at. I always thought Haaland was ridiculous. I knew that they wouldn't pay for it. It doesn't make any logical financial sense on a player that in 6 months can leave for £75 million. So for me, Dortmund were never going to sell. They already sold Jadon Sancho. And so for me, I looked at kind of alternatives. And look, Lukaku was always mentioned as the plan B. And I actually felt, you know what, Inter are in such horrible financial states. It's not like a Dortmund, while they don't want to sell their best player, if somebody comes knocking with £100 million bid, they're going to say yes. And, for Chelsea, I actually think that scares me more than kind of something else, because Lukaku, in my mind, on form, is the best 9 in the world right now. And he knows the league. He's coming back very well-rounded, and he'll come back with a point to prove in the Premier League in terms of how his previous stint went at Manchester United. So if I was a Chelsea fan, I'd be probably ecstatic at Lukaku coming in. I think that's a deal that definitely gets done. I don't think what's his name? Abramovich. What's the Chelsea owner's name? Roman Abramovich. There we go. I don't think he likes to get.
George, my disease must be contagious, bro. I think that's.
I was. Yeah, I know you gave me what you had, but no, I think he doesn't like to be taken a fool. And from the very start of the window, it's been quite clear that he was going to spend, right? And so for him not to get his first target, I think it's upsetting, and he wants to match whatever Man City are going to do, right?
Yes, he loves making a statement.
Exactly, and that's the key for me. Man City are going to make a statement in terms of Grealish. I still don't know what happens to Kane. I have this gut feeling that it goes to kind of PSG personally, but it's going to be a messy divorce. I'm going to be rubbing my hands. I think it's excellent what I'm seeing. I love it. But I do think Roman wants to match the ambition for whatever's going to happen. And so, yeah, look, for me, it's going to be a very cool redemption arc. I think he'd thrive. I'm not going to sit here and say it's going to be a bad transfer. I think Lukaku, again, I think I said earlier, it actually scares me more than Haaland. I think Haaland has a much higher ceiling, but Haaland isn't as complete right now. And for them, Chelsea fits a lot, or Lukaku fits for Tuchel's system a lot more. For me right now, I think Haaland is definitely the better deal. You get him. He's probably the best young 9 prospect ever kind of on the market. So really, Haaland is so complete. But right now, Lukaku is definitely a much better player. So for Chelsea, they're going to be a threat with a big boy striker right now on the team. I do think they have a lot of issues in DM and as well as at center back. I think they do need to address that. But for me, Lukaku makes any team in the world better. I think you'd be an idiot to say otherwise. So yeah, I'd be scared. I think that's an excellent deal for them, and it fits great.
Yeah, with me and Chelsea, I'll tell you what it tells me. It tells me they've just won the Champions League, and their number 1 target was Haaland, and their number 2 target was Hakimi. And both of them have rejected Chelsea, so even with the Champions League, they're still not big enough to be able to get them players. I don't know. I feel like they were able. I spoke to a few Chelsea fans, and they said that apparently money wasn't an issue with the Haaland deal, as much as they know I don't know, but that's what they said, and Hakimi as well. So, as George said, it does scare me. Lukaku fits their system very well. I think he's so good at holding up that ball, like going into the Conte. Back when Conte was there at Inter, they got him literally playing his back to goal for the first 6 months and didn't let him do anything else. So he's really adapted to that, and I think, as George said as well, he's coming back with a point to prove. I just think he's like the amount of chances that Chelsea team could create as well. It would surprise me if he doesn't get at least 20 goals next season if he joins them.
Yeah, I think with the Lukaku deal, it wouldn't scare me. No team in the Prem probably scares me, but like, I think it's a good thing for Chelsea, looking at a Chelsea point of view, because they do lack goals and they significantly lack goals from their front line. Jorginho was their top scorer and he only scored 7 penalties. So Chelsea do need goals like significantly from one place, and Lukaku does guarantee you 20 goals all competitions. And Chelsea are playing in all competitions, so it definitely won't be a negative. But I think they will always be linked to this type, in the sense that I think Roman wants to break the record or break their transfer record this summer, because last summer they did set a precedent for how much was spent in one window. So I think that this season they're trying to like surprise everyone again, because the Haaland deal would have been stupid money, especially to the Premier League. It would have been like 140, 150 million. So with this Lukaku deal, I'm not sure they can get it done, because what they offered was £85 million with Alonso, I think, which is a massive deal, and it got rejected quickly. And it looked weird with Lukaku, because it seemed at one point that he doesn't want to go at all. But he came out in the media saying, if I was to leave, I still love Chelsea and stuff like that. So it's weird. Like, you really don't know. And say this deal doesn't go through, where do you think they go next? Because it did look like they did off. Someone said that they offered Tammy a new contract, or they're going to look to sort out the Tammy contract if he doesn't go. So where do you think they go next if another big striker deal fails?
I mean,
You know what?
Yeah, go ahead.
on, sorry.
No, go ahead.
For me, this is interesting because I think I'm not even looking at it from the Chelsea perspective. I'm looking at it from Inter Milan's perspective. I think Inter Milan. I mean, if you were Inter Milan shoes, you do not want to sell Lukaku. If anything, that's why that Lautaro Martinez stuff came out. Arsenal might have gone in and inquired, because he's been a profile of a player that we have been interested in before, right? That was an interest, I think. That was rumored, I think, about a year ago. I heard something about it. Now, the way they see it with him, and there's a link between these two, they can make just enough money if they sell Lautaro Martinez for their asking fee to be able to stay and keep Lukaku. And Lukaku's not pushing for a move. We know that, right? So if Lukaku goes, it's because Inter Milan don't have a buyer for Lautaro Martinez, who I think they would want to sell because he's only got 2 years left in the contract. Lukaku guarantees them goals. They can always find a partner for him. They feel like they can replace Lautaro Martinez easier than they can replace Lukaku, in my mind, if I'm looking at it as Inter Milan's perspective. So I think in that sense, that's why they're trying to find someone to buy Lautaro Martinez if they can, to stave off and to keep Lukaku, right? And Lukaku's not going to kick up a fuss on this move. Now, the dilemma is going to happen is this. If someone then comes up with the money for Lautaro Martinez, they will don't have to sell to Chelsea Lukaku. If they don't, that's the third rejection in the transfer market for a target that they've gone to, right? So that's how I see the situation at the moment. For me, if Lukaku comes to the Premiership, I know what everyone knows what to expect, but there is an added thing that stopped certain Chelsea strikers. Because for me, he's always been he's always been touted as Drogba's like replacement, right? From when he was a kid, when he was first there. The thing I think people need to understand is certain Chelsea strikers have only been really successful at Chelsea is because you have to handle the pressure that comes with that, being the top dog at Chelsea and being the main striker, right? And some players have never been able to step into those shoes and sort of handle that pressure.
It'll probably be more for Lukaku, because he had to make that full circle of getting
released.
Yes,
of course. Yeah, and he has to come back and look. He's definitely a much better player than when he left Chelsea, right? We know that.
Definitely.
But that's the thing. That's the thing. He has to bring everything that he's learned and then apply it to Chelsea. And then there is, and Tuchel's got to give him some backing. They've got to give him as much backing as they gave Werner, because Werner's been given, I think, in my personal opinion, much more leeway
Way
for a
more.
signing than any
Yeah.
other Chelsea striker that I've ever seen, right? And some of the chances he's missed and some of the before, he's been told that he's been great for running around. I mean, seriously, guys, right? This is
Yeah.
meant to be Chelsea
Tammy
Football
was
Club.
benched for Werner, and Tammy was the top
Exactly.
scorer until May.
So for me, I think, there's lots more interesting dynamics going on there than people think. It's not just a straight transaction where Chelsea come in and place the money and then Inter Milan have to sell. If Inter Milan can find a buyer, and the problem is both the Spanish clubs have messed them up, right? If Real Madrid and Barca had money, one of those two would have been, hopefully Barca particularly, would have been interested in Lautaro Martinez because he's the kind of
They won
profile
him
of
last
striker.
year.
Yeah, they were, but I think the problem was the finances and stuff really kicked in there,
Yeah.
and they had all the internal wranglings, which meant that transfer didn't develop. So for me, look, I don't want to bring Arsenal into this equation, but somehow either we're being used or we're being cheeky, right? And I don't know what's going on with strikers, but we probably all agree that striker is probably the last thing that we want to do in our transfers. But somehow there is a link to what happens with Chelsea's decision with Lukaku and Inter Milan, and there might be and us, right? So I just don't want to read too much into it because there is a bit of politics and poker being played there, and I'm not sure what's going on, but there is definitely a cascade effect there. But it sounds crazy for normal fans and intelligent fans because you're thinking, look, we've got all these other deals that we haven't done yet, so why are we even having these rumors of strikers coming up yet?
Yeah.
Well, I think, look, guys, the big thing for me, by the way, is I've said the one thing that you can take from the Lautaro Martinez link is not necessarily the striker purchase for me because his profile really doesn't make sense for what we're trying to do. But the one thing I'll say is at that valuation, that lets you know what a marquee valuation we value at. Because he's what, 65 million pounds? That's exactly what James Maddison is. So it lets you know that's the indirect info that I glean from it. The one thing that I do think is, no, and we kind of discussed this at the beginning of the window, like we are in an opportunity market. And so what Arsenal did is they looked at, look, Hector, we want to offload him. Inter clearly don't have the money. Who do you guys have? What do you propose? And it went as far as that. It was very much window shopping. I used this example very much on other streams where it's like you go to the grocery store for eggs, milk, your typical grocery store list, and then you see the cookies and you're like, ooh, I like those cookies. Let me see. And then you're like, yeah, I don't think I actually need them. And you put it back. I very much think this is the case. I don't think he was ever going to be a plan A priority, nor was he the goal to do. I don't think striker is the priority for me. It really makes zero sense. And if it was, I'd be very concerned because I think there's much more priorities that are the case. So for me, it's always been a case of knock-on effects. And I think this Lukaku deal, though, it very much was the case that I think Inter are pushing this Lautaro Martinez link from their side because they've received confirmation that Chelsea are willing to pay for Lukaku, and they don't want that. And it's much easier for them to sell Lautaro in their mind, or they prefer it, than they would to sell Lukaku. And unfortunately, I do think that, Chelsea's going to come in and they're going to slap down the deal because for me, it makes complete sense for what Tuchel wants. One thing that, although I don't like Tuchel particularly, but the one thing that his system lacked was output efficiency. It really was. They created chances for fun and they needed somebody to put them away. And yeah, that was always the number one target for them. So they needed a 9. And for me, I don't think Roman will settle for anything less than a Lukaku platform, if that makes sense. Like there is no other name on the market that is equivalent to Haaland, Lukaku. Like although they aren't the same price, at least you can argue Lukaku in terms of prestige is on similar levels between the two. So
they even looked at Lewandowski, so
yeah,
it's clear that they're looking at a striker, and I think Lukaku is the best available, but right now definitely, and he's one of the best in the world. So obviously getting one of the best in the world in any position will improve your team and it will improve Chelsea, but they do need more, and it is that marquee guy they aim to get every year. So talking on big transfers, Spurs look to have completed the Romero deal for £50 million, and it's like 43 million pound up front. What do you think of this Romero deal?
Yeah, I think, when you said the big transfer, I'm pretty sure that Demiral moving to Atlanta must be a massive transfer. Don't know about this other, knock-on deal. What was that, Romero, did you say?
Yeah, the Ronaldo replacement.
Sounds like an dodgy Italian car that when it breaks down, you can't get it repaired easily. Oh, sorry, that's Alfa Romeo. Yeah, it must be related to that. Yeah, I'll keep making these bad jokes until someone's laughing something. Do you know what I mean? So, anyway, no, listen, man. I for them, they've got more than just Romero to do in that transfer market. If Nuno's going to get his system set up, so for me, this goes back to the Harry Kane transfer. I honestly think that Tottenham, Danny Levy is brilliant at putting a show on for his fans. At the moment, what you guys are seeing, and I've seen this before, and if you're a Tottenham fan and you listen to our podcast for some crazy reason, right? And maybe you no, let's not be too sarcastic, because there will be people hopefully just listen for the sake of like the general football stuff that we talk about. Because allegedly we have a reputation here, guys. Do you not know that we always talk about is Mikel Arteta and how brilliant he is and how we love Kroenke and the board and everybody else? Because that's what I was told before. Which I know that meant that person has never listened to one podcast, right, that we've ever done. But anyway, look, going back to Tottenham, they've got a lot to do in that transfer market. For me, I think Daniel Levy is doing his typical show for the fans. Look, we're being tough with Harry Kane, and Harry Kane does, wants to leave, but look, he's got to be smirching his reputation. Listen, guys, let me tell you something. Man City do not operate on ifs and buts. They only operate on 100% certainty. If they let Kun Aguero go, they knew they got a deal that they can strike with Tottenham, right? There is no way they're going to sit the whole season playing a false nine, right? When they've said that they're going to go and mean business. So for me, I personally, right, I'll be shocked if it's the other way around. The Harry Kane deal doesn't get done. I think the Harry Kane deal is done. They're allowing Tottenham now to go and buy their targets, right?
Yeah.
When they've bought their targets, Man City can completely afford to wait until after the game to suddenly say, Harry Kane's pressure and them bidding multiple times has finally let Tottenham relent, and then now Tottenham willing to sort of relent. And here you go. Here's a record transfer fee for Harry Kane, blah, blah, blah. So listen, we're going to hear this all out on Sky, everywhere else, but Harry Kane will end up at Man City because Daniel Levy knows that if you're going to cash in on Harry Kane, this is the time to do it. And if you're going to do a big rebuild and you don't have the money, he's the only way you're going to be able to do it with a manager like with Nuno. So let's
100%. 100%.
Common sense.
I feel like, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think when they actually play, he'll play the first half in a Tottenham shirt, and then at half time we'll go to
I think right now,
shirt?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
They're saving face. I think they're saving face.
You know what? It'd be like an additional episode for All or Nothing Tottenham. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? All or Nothing Man City in the second half.
Little bonus episode.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think they're just saving face with because even today, Daniel Levy was at the training ground for some reason, and then once that was confirmed, the story came out saying Kane actually went to the Caribbean and he has to quarantine. But yesterday there was no story about him quarantining, and it was big that he missed training. So I think a lot of the stuff they're doing now is to save face, because at the end of last week, this Romero deal looked weird, and then suddenly once the Harry Kane stuff happened, it's ramped up and it's nearly done. They just got Joe Hart to go to Celtic, so they are doing deals and they are trying for stuff. So this is their third signing of the window, I think, and maybe their second or third sale.
Well, they got that goalkeeper on loan, don't they?
Yeah, Golini,
and then that
Brian
Romero
Gill,
guy.
This guy, Romero. Romero is a good player from what I've seen of him.
Yeah, he is.
He's a good player. He's explosive. I think he's 6'1", maybe.
I'll be interested to see who the Harry Kane replacement is. It'll be interesting to see what kind of profile Tottenham go for. But the other thing I wanted to ask you, boys, if it's all right, is what do you think the Kane deal will be? Do you think it will be like a big 100, because they rejected 100 million? So do you think it will be like £120 million deal, 130 million, or do you think it will be player plus cash?
I don't think it'll be a player plus cash, because no player from Man City will want to go there. And I do think it's going to be a straight deal. I do think it's going to probably be in the £120 million range. I don't think it goes higher just because of his age. And in fact, it could even be 100 million. Just the structure is different, right? Like, I think you're looking much more than 100 to 120 million for Harry Kane at all. It's just how much upfront is that going to be? Look, you know what? I thought Paratici was a horrible appointment, but I've got to give credit. I think a lot of the players that he has got, Brian Gill, Christian Romero, like those are good players. I'm not going to sit here and say they're bad players, right? I have some concerns on some of them, but they're excellent prospects. You know what I mean? And so for me, I think if I was in Tottenham, and like I want to throw up a bit, but you're going to lose Harry Kane. But I think those prospects, like they're not horrible. This isn't horrible business. I don't think it's another Soldado and Bale situation. So there should be some confidence in that aspect. Like you are recruiting some really good players, but yeah, I think you're going to go through a big rebuild. It's going to be really bad because in order to replace that kind of goals and that presence, right? Like I know that you've got Heung-min Son that's just signed a new extension, but anybody that you get on the market right now, besides maybe Danny Ings, oddly, is not going to give you the immediate impact in goals that you're going to be starved of. And so it's not only that, Harry Kane comes so deep that you're going to have to rejig the midfield. Like it's a double-edged sword. Like the reliance on Harry Kane in their system is absolutely immense. So it's not just that they have really poor fullbacks in a defense, which is aging, and they really do have to kind of change up, which they are with Romero. But the midfield, especially with Eric Lamella's gone as well, I really struggle to see how they fit everybody in. Brian Gill's a great purchase. I think with Heung-min Son, it's a very good kind of winger profile that you're getting. It's just a matter of how do they replace Harry Kane, which is two players, right? I think that's going to be the play. So look, if I were them, and I hope they don't listen to me, I would probably go for Danny Ings and actually Mathis Pereira. I think that could be a very dangerous front line with Brian Gill. And Heung-min Son. And I think in terms of if they were smart, they would actually go for Boubacar Kamara, who I really want in addition. So I think for 100 million there, that would be my Daniel Levy rebuild for Tottenham.
Yeah, they are looking at selling Bergwijn because he seems unhappy. So he looks, apparently he's going back to Holland. And so right now it looks like Brian Gill may play on the right wing. So I'm not sure they've completed everything they need to do because they've lost leadership. Obviously, you lose it with Kane. Alderweireld's gone. Vertonghen went last year. So they are losing some of their leaders and their pillars of the team that they had, their golden era. But yeah, so like all the big teams are now doing some business. Even Liverpool just signed Fabinho to a new 4-year deal, I think it was. I'm not sure the number.
I think it was 2026. I think 5-year deal.
5-year deal. So yeah, Fabinho on a 5-year deal. Arsenal, Xhaka on a 4-year deal. Everyone's making bids apart from Liverpool. Manchester United are looking at Trippier. So yeah, and I think it's been a good one today.
Yep.
I think we've spoken about a lot of the players that we want. Do you guys want to shout your socials, Willow and Nom?
Saliba season 2 ends. I always keep on coming on here and saying I'm going to rebrand soon, but I don't know how to change my sort of handle, so we'll work that out.
Okay.
And as everyone can see, I've got my handle on there, guys. It's at Nominal Ali. Don't ask me to spell it all out for you guys. You'll find me on there. I don't usually have Dennis Bergkamp Abbey now. I've got Saka Abbey now. So those of you guys who are on Twitter, you can add me. You just have to type in Nom Ali. There's not many of us around, so you'll be able to add me there.
Yeah, and we're here, guys, all the time. You can find me at GeorgeV_AFC on Twitter.
Yeah, and me is Pure CKK on Twitter. Check out Ball Over Passion on TikTok. We have a podcast dropping tomorrow on YouTube at 3 p.m. I think it's already scheduled. So it was a debate between me, Curran, Wave, and the Z on Arsenal and Xhaka. I'd recommend you check that out because Z and Wave really don't like Xhaka. They really don't. So yeah, check out our podcasts. We'll be live on Saturday, obviously, on our podcast next week. And check out our podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So yeah, thank you for watching. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And see you next time.